Namaste, viewers, and welcome to this episode of Amazing Vedas with Dr. Pariksith Singh. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for joining us. Viewers, you remember last time we saw how evil is not a substance in the Vedas, okay? It's not some eternal person like Satan, it's not some inherited stain like the original sin, but it's really obstruction, disorder, hoarding, falsehood, darkness, misalignment, and we can think about different levels of, so to speak, unrita, and I remember that in the Vedas, Upanishads, you always say, om ritam vachmi, satyam vachmi. So you start any, like a samvad, like we are having a samvad. So what is our contract? The contract is both of us will speak the truth. We are not going to massage it or spin it, and we
Yes.
don't want to propagandize. We don't want anything material out of this. So there's a purity that Dr. Singh mentioned last time, which comes from tapas, when you purify your intention and then offer that as ahuti. But in the Vedic, if you want to use the word register, because Dr. Singh loves linguistics, so in the Vedic register, look, there is cosmic obstruction. We saw vritra, we saw ahi, we saw ratri, tamas, etc. There is a moral offense, agha, anrita. There are ritual disruptions. Rakshasas. Remember, Ram and Lakshman are called by Vishwamitra, say, please protect the yagya,
Yes.
interfering, Vigna. Even today in our corporate or, business world, we're trying to accomplish something and there'll always be some obstructors, you see. So this is for me, it's very contemporary. Then, social, or you might even say monetary, the hoarders. I mean, sometimes we think about our banks, but let's not name them. But, the Scrooges, I remember my Dickens, and what Father Christmas and the ghosts of Father Christmas past, and Silas Marner. When I was young, I read that book, and I was so sad about this man who hoarded all his money, and there was this little girl finally who, the miserliness, etc. And then the psychological, you see how we, anger, and, the game of dice, we talked about it, Dr. Singh. It's very old. The game of dice goes back right to the Vedas. So,
Yes.
so ontologically, though, I mean, metaphysically, and axiologically, to use these terms from the discourse or the register of philosophy, we don't have that kind of terrible idea of evil. And look at what's happened, even to something like detective fiction, which I like, because it solves a puzzle. And, if you have an active mind, you want a puzzle to be solved. And forget about the good old, murder mystery, Sherlock Holmes. Now you have serial killers, you have mad people. So there's no evil also. I want to ask you this question. You mentioned Zoroastrianism and then Manichaeism, where it
Yes.
became, this polarity. And then, we're going back in time, of course. And then you have the Abrahamic conceptions, which to me, they're so powerful that even today, we are in the shadow of those conceptions, because remember, modern secularism comes out of the should I say, disenchantment with the church and with the dogmas and the authority of the church. So modern secularism, or the secularization of the Abrahamic world, is what we actually sort of live with today. And so existential, ecological notions of evil also are, they have their roots in that Abrahamic idea. Now, what we want to do with our amazing Vedas is, like, this obstruction, this coiling up of our energies, because, we are so pessimistic. I was talking to some young people, and Dr. Singh, they don't have a very happy view of the world. There's economic pessimism, there's ecological pessimism, there is political pessimism,
Yes.
And yeah, some people want to secede. Somebody's invented this term, the cessation of the successful. That is, the successful people want to secede. Like Atlas Shrugged. So what we want to do is we want to refertilize, like the wasteland. We want the waters to flow again. The chalice and the you know we're looking for that eternal spring which is within, and remove the obstructions of the go. And someday we want that ghritam also, again, because it's a powerful symbol. Shobanda has a big section on ghritam, as you remember. So let me ask you this: do we have, Dr. Singh, your Hindi is very good and your Sanskrit is amazing. Do we have a word for evil in India, in Indian languages?
There are no equivalents. I don't know of any equivalents. So one word is adharmic, which of course means someone who is not following the order. The logos, if you remember your Stoics, and even actually the beginning of Genesis itself. In the beginning of was the word. The word is not a just some kind of abstract thing. The logos is the hidden order in the universe. That is what the Stoics believed in, and that's before even in the Old Testament. Genesis is actually starts very beautifully, and then almost seems like some people came in and hijacked that beautiful description, beautiful model. But let's go back to Indian languages. Papa is a word that is used, and I think even in the Gita it is used. But there it is again, when you do not offer what you have, you do not offer, you steal, stain. When you do not give what is already belonging to the universe, you try to withhold it, then, or you try to taste it before offering it to the universe. So that's where Papa comes, or it comes when you're divided. Sanshaya comes if you're living in doubt, then Sri Krishna looks down upon it. But Sri Krishna really, really, I think, hits hard on the inability to stand up for dharma, the inability to stand up for the righteousness, for the order of the universe, and not having a spine. To him, that is evil. To not follow being strong, being weak is a crime to Sri Krishna. And he really scolds Arjuna. What has happened to you? And two very powerful shlokas, he tells them that this is not an Aryan's behavior. This will not get you to heaven. And look at what people will think of you. And this is a very important thing. What Not because he's looking for some false fame, but the how you're perceived by your equals, that is important. So these are terms there, but I do not have a Dvait, maybe duality, the one who lives in Dvait, or in confusion, Brahm, but not. See, it is not that the words don't exist, it is the connotation that has been given to it, and a kind of a paradigm has been created out of it, that this is just bad, this is dark, this is unredeemable, right? So it is so bad that it is unredeemable, and you run away from it. You run away to the good half, stay away from the bad half. We don't have it conceptually, we don't have such a word.
Yeah, precisely. That's what I was also thinking, that Papa is not quite evil. It's like a fall, right? It's Patana. I think the root is, I think it goes, and it has to do with sometimes even ill luck, mischief, misfortune, and you have the seven so-called deadly sins in India, and all of these are, like I think in Yaska, in Nirukta, I think he says, I looked it up, and as you were discussing this, papatya mano avan eva patati iti va papatyetera va syat. So it means falling or falling downward,
Yes.
decline, falling, sinking. And this is from Greitel's Nirukta, which is that, we've looked at this. It's a downward movement, And so when we say aspiration, upward movement, it's to me, frankly, Papa. See, our society is not a Papa-oriented society or culture or civilization. The Vedic view, in my understanding, is an upaya. So you're looking at, okay, so moha, mother, matsarya, all of those, Kam, Krodh, Madh, Moha, Matsarya, the seven. So these are like, they are the falling off from virtue, but it's not some original deep sin, So this papatva is not an eternal thing, and there's certainly no eternal damnation, no hellfire where that terrorized the so-called medieval world, you see. And
Yes.
it's just in something that's inappropriate, which is misaligned with the cosmic order, anrata, we thought.
Yes.
And dharma means already, you know cosmic order. And it's very interesting, evil as well. It's Evil comes from the old Germanic, and it ultimately has Indo-European, or what they used to call Indo-Aryan roots. But only when it gets into the Abrahamic tradition that it acquires this ontological independence from the cosmic unity that we've talked about. So and I believe the word evil, the root, is very close to the word upa, you see. But upa for us is near. Upadesha, Upanishad, it's spatial, it's not moral, right? So, I mean, these are very, for me, ilaj, we say, from the Persian, but kya ilaj kya hai? You go to so-called astrology is given a very bad name, but I know many politicians, even if they are atheists, they look at astrology. And there's a new book by Mr. M.J. Akbar, where I attended the launch. He documents how all the Mughal emperors used astrologers. You
Is that
see,
right?
yeah, Tipu Sultan. So the Muslim rulers in India used astrology pervasively. And why? Why did they do that? Because it was about ilaj, it's about upaya, you see. So I just wanted to say that it's not papa, but upaya that we should focus on. What is the misalignment? So even the other day we were just talking with Maria ji, and she also was saying that ill health is actually misalignment.
That's right.
You're out of sync
Yes.
with your native self, which is supposed
Yes.
to be health, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Swastha,
Yes.
swasthya.
Right.
And you're a doctor too. You know that you can talk about it a bit before we
Yes.
conclude. But this
Yes.
misalignment, so what is the doctor doing? Either through medication or through some lifestyle style changes. They're saying, listen, dude, you're misaligned. Take a break, de stress, get some sunshine, or whatever it is, especially for chronic ailments, not for acute ones. So, Papa is not what we have to focus on all the time, but on upaya.
Yeah, and just to add a couple more things to that thought. One is, we don't have an eternal hell. There is no eternal hell. There is no blasphemy, because you are an intimate part of the divine. You're not separated from the divine. God did not create you and threw you out. Okay, you're no nothing. I have nothing to do with you. Now you recover. So that it's a very so the problem is, when you create that model, that you're no longer connected to God, you're not intimately close to God. Now you have the problems that are created by the model itself. This is the thought that you're separated. And then, of course, Christ spends uh, all his life trying to heal that, bring that together, and then they turn him into a symbol of humanity's eventual oneness with God. So even that model itself tries to fix itself very imperfectly, because to us, Christ is, of course, a great spiritual figure who has found the eternal truth once again, in his own manner, in his own form, in his own name, beautifully. But here, because he's almost like the only event where you have outside, you have a whole lineage of such great spiritual realizations in this tradition. They tie up Christ. Even Christ is tied up, unfortunately. And that's to me, that is the papa, to tie up such a great being into a limited perspective. Going back to what you said, yes, sva astha, being in the self. There are three movements, and this is a Vedic model. One is the movement upward. Movement upward is good. Movement downwards, adho patan, patati, doing, as which is what you said, going downward is. And when we say downward, this is a Vedic symbol. Downward is into unconsciousness, into darkness, losing what you have gained in your ascent, in your arohana. The second movement that is there is, of course, a movement towards light, light coming on you, growing in luminosity, growing in wisdom, growing in truth. And that itself creates arogyam. Arogyam is being in a state where diseases cannot even come to you. Roga cannot even, it's outside. It does not have the power to penetrate your so-called armor of light. The third movement is wideness, the constriction, sankirna. So we are tied up. If you remember the story of Shunakshep, he has three constrictions, if I may say, constriction here, here, and here, due to which he is damned, if we may say, use the word. He's just going to be sacrificed, and in a bad way, right? And what does he do? He prays to Varuna, the moral, the deva of morality. But what kind of morality? The morality is to be wide, to be the all, to be the infinite. That is the morality.
Unbound.
Unbound. And so that freedom of three bondages are cleared, and now he becomes a rishi. What a powerful symbol. So I think these are the movements we should realize, and we still use them. The Vedic model of high being good and low being bad, dark being bad, light being good. We are subconsciously, we are using narrow being bad, the ego, which is small, and the Varuna being wide, vast, intimacy being one with the divine, the yoga being one with the divine is good, being separate from the divine is bad. And then these symbols, vritra is tendency. I always think of vritra as vritti, as a tendency, and there is a habit. It's trying to avran. I'll block it. I will not let you do. Not only am I messed up, but I'm going to mess you up. And so that kind of an attitude. And so Indra, who is the wise one, who is the creator of perfect forms, he says, okay, let me get the perfect bones of a great realized beings and use that wisdom, the realization, to destroy you. So I think this a wholeness, it's like saying the ocean has evil inside it. Ocean has waves inside it. Yes, of course it has waves, ups and downs, sideways. The waves will die, the waves will live, but the ocean is eternal. The ocean is always there. And if you suddenly, if you kind of zoom out, or you unfocus from that little narrow view that you have of the world, suddenly a different view emerges. And then in that view, Papa takes a different meaning, kind of. And I was Trailanga Swami. I don't know if I told you that story. Right? Ramakrishna went to him. And so Ramakrishna, and these are giants, right? And it is said that he asked him, is this world one or two? I mean, valid question. Ramakrishna himself at such a height, but he had an experience of the divine as a separate person, and then he had the experience of the divine in unity, in Vedanta. And Trailanga Swami's answer is beautiful. He said, when you are in samadhi, it is one. When your consciousness is united with the divine, if I'm translating samadhi, you're one. Everything is one. Shiva. When you're back to the normal mindset, everything is multiple.
Yeah.
So
No, that's wonderful, because while you were talking about damnation, see, it's amazing that in the, so to speak, religious world, the world dominated by the church and by confession, which was a way to keep control on large sections of the populace, individuals had the fear of being damned, which could, in some ways, be used to control them, right? But the sad part of modernity is that it seems as if the entire species is damned, it would
Yes.
seem. So the entire species needs to be redeemed, if you want to use Christian theology. And I'm so glad you brought in Christ, because they bound him in such a horrible way. They nailed him to the cross, and then they used that icon, that image, that terrible image, to constantly torture, generations of people and scare them. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I've spent time in Spain, in places like Manresa, which was the place where the Counter Reformation, Ignatius Loyola, etc. But what I'm trying to say is, I went to a museum there where they had collected all these icons of Christ, and they had put it in a warehouse. So when I went there, it was really an overwhelming experience for me. And then I asked the curator, "Why did you put them here?" Because he said they're so sad, and there's so many of them. That we decided not to, because if you display these images, there'll be nothing else to display. Whereas there was so much other art, there was beauty, there were other things in that period that we also wanted to bring out. So we put all of these icons, and they're so sad. And so I'm saying, I'm sort of, I want to conclude by giving you a teaser, viewers. Last time I gave you a little bit of homework in the other show that we do on poetry, but I want to give you a little bit of homework. See, now we are looking forward to the 4th of July, the 250th anniversary of this wonderful country, of this republic. Please tell us, what was it founded on? What was its ideal? What did they want to free themselves of? What were the impulses? You know, that quest for liberty, for wideness, Varun, not to be bound, not to be tied down. And yes, we will talk about Shunakshepa, because it ties in with a very important figure in our history, Harishchandra. So, with those words, thank you, Dr. Singh. And thank you, viewers. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and follow us on X, especially Gen Z. Till next time, amazing Vedas. Namaste.